Hi everyone, this is Dane Young with itvce.com. You can find me on Twitter @YoungTech. In this video, I'm going to show you what the finished product looks like once we have everything up and running with Microsoft Deployment Toolkit deploying to HP Moonshot. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so what I have here is I've connected into the SSH session of the chassis manager, and I'm just going to run a couple commands to show different options from the node that I would like to deploy the Windows image to. I'm going to be deploying to cartridge 4 node 2, and so first thing I want to do is check to see what the boot option is set to, and right now it's currently set to boot from hard disk drive, or HDD. So if you run the command show node boot C4N2, you'll see the boot configuration for that particular node. Next, what I'm going to do is set the boot once parameter for that particular node to Pixie, in order that the first time that it comes online, it will actually try to boot from the network. And then as soon as MDT kicks in and streams down the operating system to the local drive, then it'll reboot and it'll boot from the hard disk drive from that point forward. So this is very important to make sure that the preferred boot option is set to hard disk drive, but that the boot once parameter is set to Pixie. Next, I'm going to check to make sure that the power of that cartridge is currently turned off. The node on that cartridge is currently turned off. And then I'm going to go ahead and power it on. Then I need to connect to the virtual serial port. So the command that I want to run is connect node VSP and then the node number. It connects, and you'll be able to see a couple different options here as it's booting up. This is the normal BIOS or post that you would normally see by plugging in a monitor to a desktop. And after we give it a couple seconds here, eventually it will come online and it will start booting from the network, and we'll be able to see its IP address here. Okay, so it's fetching to see if there's any IP addresses available. It grabs an IP address. You can see there 172.16.224.29. And what I'm going to do in my command prompt here is just do a terminal ping to that IP address. I use this throughout the process as kind of a diagnostics method, as we won't get any actual input or output during the MDT process. This will tell me when the node is actually online and when it's actually responding back. So it will get to a certain point throughout the MDT task sequence, and then eventually it will be online to the point that it's able to reply back to these terminal pings. We'll go ahead and fast forward this part of it, but I want to show you from a VMware Virtual Machine console perspective what this MDT process actually looks like as we fast forward it. So let's go ahead and bring that up here. Alright, so in this VMware console, I have a virtual machine that stood up, and I always use a virtual machine as diagnostics for my MDT process, especially when deploying to Moonshot, because you're not going to get a whole lot of feedback in terms of where the process is breaking, if it is breaking, while you're doing the deployment. So I like to use a virtual machine, actually set it up the same exact way as Moonshot, to prefer the hard disk drive, and then do a boot once to the network adapter, and we'll go ahead and see what that looks like. So I've hit the escape key in my virtual machine, which brings up the boot menu. I've selected the Intel network adapter as my boot. So I have my boot once set to the network adapter, and it's going to go ahead and grab an IP address, and then it's going to connect to MDT here. So it pulls down the initial light touch WinPE environment, and everything should be automated from this perspective. The virtual machine just should take the default task sequence that we set up in our bootstrap.ini preferences, and it should go ahead and start the installation process. What we're basically validating through this process is that no user interaction is required at any stage of the MDT process. We basically want it to do a boot once to Pixie, permanent boot to the hard disk drive, grab that default task sequence that we set up in the bootstrap.ini file, pull down all of the configuration, go through the entire setup, install the the AMD Catalyst Control Center component, install the various drivers that are required, enable RDP, disable the firewall. We want this entire thing to be zero touch, with exception of telling it to boot from the network adapter the first time. So we'll go ahead and speed up this operation at this point. This will take another couple minutes, and we'll go back and check on our Moonshot node and see how that's coming along. Okay, after tirelessly waiting for a good period of time here for the Moonshot node, we start receiving some responses to our terminal ping. And at this point, that means that the node is on the network. It's responding to ping, which means that we could probably RDP to it, and the firewall is probably disabled because it wouldn't be responding to ping otherwise. So we'll go ahead and open up an RDP client and connect to that IP address that we were running the terminal ping to, and then finish up the MDT installation from there. Alright, so I'm going to fire up an RDP window here. I'm going to go ahead and authenticate with that username and password that I specified in my operating system details, my unattended file. And we see that the MDT process did finish. I'm just going to run appwiz.cpl really quick, which brings up programs and features, and verify that my applications that I wanted installed are installed. I'll also verify that the firewall is turned off for all of my profiles, and I can confirm that here. And this basically just tells me that it will respond to pings or any other type of traffic from any network. If you don't want the firewall turned off permanently, certainly you can define some exceptions like RDP and any other network tools that you need access to the node. But just considering that it's a headless installation, it's always better to have full network access, at least initially. Alright, and the last thing that I want to just check is see, based on that PowerShell command that I ran for remote desktop, enabling remote desktop, what that option actually looks like here in remote settings. So if we go into system and then go to remote settings, you can see that it's set to the preferred mode, which is allow connections only from computers running remote desktop with NLA, which is the more secure option. Alright, we'll go ahead and close everything down, and at this point I'm going to go check the device manager to see if there's any unknown drivers or adapters. Of course, it detects that there's the AMD HD 8400 Radeon display adapter, as well as my dual 1 gig NICs and my quad-core Opteron X2150 APU. That summarizes this installation video. I hope you've learned something. I hope this has been valuable to you. Go back and check the blog post for the details on how to get this set up. If you want to reach out to me on Twitter, you can find me at YoungTech or follow my blog itvce.com. Thanks so much.